Hi, my name is Chris Dix. This is Founder Stories. Today we have Cyrus Massoumi, the co-founder and CEO of ZocDoc. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So can you tell us what is ZocDoc?
ZocDoc's the easiest online way to find a doctor who accepts your insurance and book an appointment online.
And so basically, like, I've used ZocDoc to book. So I go to my doctor's website, and they, I think, redirected me to ZocDoc. And it's sort of like, I think of it kind of as a user, sort of like open table. So I don't have to, like, in the old days, I'd like call like 40 restaurants and see if they had availability, and now you just go and sort of modernize. It's just basically.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a funny story. Early in the company's life, we would describe ourselves as open table for doctors, and people would come back to us and say, well, why can't doctors book their restaurants and open table like everyone else? So we've stopped using that headline, but it's effectively helping people book doctor's appointments online, and give them the tools that they can see the available times and see who accepts their insurance, see pictures, read reviews, all that stuff. Okay. And we have obviously mobile applications for every major mobile platform and a website.
And how'd you guys start it, and where'd you get the idea?
So back in 2007, I was a consultant flying across the country, and I had a really bad sinus infection. My plane landed back in New York, and I ruptured my eardrum, and I had to find a doctor. And so like many people, I'm not from New York, and I wanted to see an ENT specialist, so I went to my insurance company website and started going down the list of doctors, and the information was so bad. Some of the doctors were no longer practicing. One doctor had actually was deceased. And in the end, it took me 4 days to get a doctor's appointment. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but New York has the highest density of doctors in the world. There's more doctors per capita in New York City than any other city in the world, the second city being Tel Aviv. Mm. And so I thought, I do everything in my life on the internet, from buying my groceries to booking my restaurants to booking my travel, buying all my clothes, and yet I couldn't find a doctor when I needed one. So I went to one of my colleagues at McKinsey, is a physician, Oliver Karaz, and he was McKinsey's expert on electronic health records and practice management systems. And I said, why can't I find a doctor as easily as I can find everything else in my life? And he's like, you're right, we should quit our jobs and start this company. So we went with our third co-founder, Nick, who I worked together with at Trilogy Software many years ago, and we all started ZocDoc at the end of 2007. And
so you guys, it's like OpenTable, you have sort of a chicken and egg problem, as we call it, right? Which is you have to get the demand side and the supply side, which of course, once you get there, is incredibly valuable. But how did you initially kind of get over that hump?
It was really, really hard at the beginning. The initial sets of doctors, we had no website. I was literally taking a PowerPoint page and walking into these doctors' offices and trying to convince them that online booking was the future of healthcare. And there's
you had no product at that point, or
we had no product because we had launched at the TechCrunch, the original TechCrunch 40 conference back in 2007. And I remember when we got in and realized we had the privilege of launching at that conference, we didn't have any doctors. And we had literally a few weeks before launch, and we needed to fill the site up with doctors. And I was really worried that the site wouldn't have a scroll bar on the right-hand side. You'd do a search, and we would just only have like one or two docs. So we started just with dentists, and I literally stalked a handful of dentists. In one case, I literally sat in a waiting room of an office for 6 hours. And then I got 3 dentists to sign on to ZocDoc as a result of that. And so it was like really, it was really, really difficult in the early days to get the initial doctors to sign on. And, it's funny because we built all this logic on this site, assuming that, we're going to launch on this TechCrunch conference and everyone's going to book dentist appointments on ZocDoc and we're run out of appointments. We had all this logic built for, sorry, we ran out of appointments. Yeah. And, it didn't work that way. It took a long time for us. We spent 2.5 years just in New York, constantly iterating, trying new ways to get patients, to get doctors, et cetera. And finally, after focusing on just one market for 2.5 years, everything clicked, and we've been expanding ever since.
Okay, so you started to just focus only on New York, and at what point, how do you think of how many doctors are there in New York, and what do you have to do to get to critical mass? Is it like 2,000? I mean, I assume at some point you kind of needed to be your metric would be a new patient comes along and they have a 80% hit rate or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. So over time, we've constantly expanded, for example, how we define New York City. Okay. So it used to be just certain parts of Manhattan, Midtown and downtown Manhattan, where there was the highest concentration of doctors. Then we started expanding to all of Manhattan, then all of New York City, then the greater New York City area. So if you look at the greater New York City area, there's 60,000 doctors. Now, the interesting thing about our business is that it's different than perhaps flights or restaurants, is that a doctor is not a doctor is not a doctor. You have to have different specialties. And on ZocDoc, we have 40 different specialties now. So each of them is like a different service offering, and we have to make sure that we have a good network across each of these specialties. And so we've been very.
So you have to know that if somebody needs an ENT versus needs a, I don't know what, like a intestinal doctor or something, like
Exactly.
that, you're going to have an 80% hit rate. What, I don't know what
Exactly.
number, some percent, some
Exactly.
reasonable percentage hit rate.
And there's certain, depending on the city, they travel certain distances, and then you have to, of course, cross list that with the insurances that are accepted, and there's different insurances that are required in different areas. Like, so for example, Guardian Dental Insurance seems to be very popular in Midtown East. And there's all these sorts of interesting things that feed into the algorithms. And so we've had to be very analytical about how we've grown our doctor network and who we've let on when. Lots of doctors come to us now, but we don't always necessarily let them on. We sort of measure what we want to have on ZocDoc in what order, and we launch specialties in a specific order across all of our markets.
Really? So you turn away, and these, by the way, the business model, right, is the doctors pay you a fixed fee per year. It's not like OpenTable, right, where they pay per lead. Is that right? Does the doctors actually come to you saying, I want to pay you, and you turn them away?
Yeah, it happens because, and sometimes in a...
These are not because they're low-quality doctors, or they...
There's a number of reasons, but for example, if a doctor is a low-quality doctor, we would perhaps turn them away. If a doctor was in a geography that wasn't an area that we focused on, or in a specialty that we've not yet launched in a specific geography.
I see.
Because it's important for us that consumers have a good experience, and we don't want to, tell a consumer that they can come to ZocDoc to find a cardiologist and then only have one cardiologist.
So you'd rather just say we don't do cardiology yet in this city than you would say we do and have one result or something.
Exactly, and I think that the guiding factor, when we sort of passed our 60 employee mark, it became clear that we wanted to formalize our values. We took a whole tour out to Vegas to do a tour of Zappos, which I'd recommend any entrepreneur to go do if they have the opportunity in between rounds at the craps table maybe. But we learned a lot from them, and they had formalized their values, and so it's something we did about a year ago at ZocDoc. And one of the values, our first value, is patients first. We put the patients first in everything that we do, and it's very important that anytime a patient comes to ZocDoc, they have a great experience. So there's things that people have asked us to do that perhaps would make us more money, or put us in an even a better financial position, whatever. And we've turned it away because it necessarily wasn't in the patient's best interest. And if you look at the business and what's made it successful is patients using the site, telling their friends about it, having a great experience. And so we've really just made sure, even though we're paid by the doctor, the patient is, we're a patient-led company. And that's what's been one of the keys to our success, I think.
And I've heard you're doing very well. Can you give some sense of metrics? How many doctors? I don't know what metrics you use.
So the beginning of last year, I think we may have been in 3 or 4 markets. We're now live in 13 markets.
Those all U.S. or?
All in the U.S., yeah. It's interesting how we expand too. We actually crowdsource how we've expanded. So we let people go online and vote. And wherever we get the most number of votes, that's where ZocDoc expands. So we have a built-in user base. So the chicken and egg problem you're talking about, post City 1 actually hasn't been so much of an issue because we have the latent consumer demand heading into that market.
Yeah.
But we...
I've seen other startups do that where they you have to unlock a city, users have to unlock a city.
Exactly, and it's worked really well. We still do it today, and people are still voting, and it's been a really great strategy. I'm sorry, the original question...
I was just saying some metrics of how well you're doing.
Sorry. So we've number of available doctor appointments is one of the things that's really important to us, because when a consumer comes to the site, we want them to have supply.
Sure.
And I think if you look at March of last year, we had something like 2 million available appointments. By the end of the year, we're at 5.5 million available appointments. So that's over the next 90 days.
That means at any given moment, over the next 90 days.
Yeah, so right now we have, it's probably north of 6 million, maybe even approaching 7 million available appointments over the next 90 days. And so...
and how many employees are you?
So I think we just this week surpassed 200.
200.
Yeah. So at the beginning of last year, we were like 50, maybe even less than 50, and so
how does that roughly break down? Like you do direct sales, correct? Like you do telesales, or
we do. We have a couple of different sales forces. So we do direct sales. We do a lot of customer service. So we sort of hold the patient's hand or the doctor's hand if they need it, and we also do quite a bit of engineering work because. We're not replacing anything in these doctors' offices. We're working with the systems they already have. And what people don't maybe not realize is that the healthcare IT space is heavily fragmented. And so we've basically integrated to all the major systems that doctors use to run their practices. And we're constantly updating, and as these systems evolve, we're updating our integration. So it took us a long time.
You have to integrate into their existing appointment systems.
Exactly.
And there's 50 of these or something, or there's a bunch of them.
Actually, there's 1,400 of these.
Really?
And obviously not all 1,400 have major market penetration, but if you look at by market, there's different systems.
How
that
could there
have
be
been
1,400? Is it just because everyone has these little consulting shops building them or
Yeah,
something?
you know what I think it is that doctors are just really smart people, and they all do things in their own way. And if they find a system that does something in their specific way, that's what they want. And so obviously, you're right. There's probably 50 that have over 1% penetration in the U.S. Of any system, and the rest of them are very long tail. But you know, it's something that's never really been consolidated, and historically people have tried. But you know, doctors are just very discerning consumers, and they all want the system they have, and the cost of switching is so incredibly high.
Yeah.
You know, it's not easy. These systems aren't designed to easily. They're not built on a SQL easy SQL database where you can just query them and port the data over. And so
Well,
every
it's not
time
only data porting, it's also you have to retrain all of the administrators, I assume, and like.
Exactly. And you know, my father, he runs a medical practice down in Florida, and he's been practicing probably for north of 40 years. And you know, I think in the early 80s, he implemented a system because Medicare had required that doctors actually implement healthcare technology, basically to send the Medicare claims electronically. They needed to have a software system. So he bought a software system back then in the early 80s, and he still uses the same system today. Yeah. It's not even, you know, it's probably updated a little bit, but it's still on some archaic Unix platform that's really not even like a core Unix kernel, and it's really very kludgy, and that's what he uses. Because the cost of transferring everything over is just too astronomical.
Yeah. And it probably just does the job, and he's not ultimately a tech company, right? So
yeah, exactly.